Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I got my first YouTube strike. Well, it's actually a semi-strike. The video I did about good to see old friends, I think it was, or something along that, when the plants came back from Malvern, I opened my big mouth about football. And YouTube have decided that that video is not that suitable for advertisers. So I have to watch me mouth. It's no big deal. I could have asked for a manual review, but quite honestly, it's not worth the effort. I put videos up most days, sometimes two. You might even be unfortunate and get three sometimes, little short ones. But yeah, I understand there were a few expressions in there that were used that would have been picked up on word searches that, taken out of context, would have been deemed out of order. So I understand what they've done. Just make sure I don't do that sort of thing again. No big deal. Right, today it's very early in the day. I'm not actually getting out here yet. I was asked to do a look at the pinguiculars and talk about their care, which basically there isn't any for me. Well, very little. And I'm going to have a look at some of the mounts today. So this is more of a progress update. I mean, some of the mounted orchids are actually in bloom. Some are starting to go over, some are pushing on. But yeah, the mounted orchids do include an assortment. Although they're mainly dendrobiums, there are other sorts of orchids that are mounted. So we'll have a look at some of those today. And in addition to that, there's a fair few of the mounted orchids were out of the big box from Beatrix. And I like to sort of show those orchids now and again so that the lady in question can see how they're doing. I mean, out of that box, the oncidiums didn't make it. They were just DOA, basically. They just didn't cope with the cold. And some of the others didn't look too happy. But it turns out that some of those that didn't look happy that I seem to think the cold had got at were actually like that when they left. So not so bad as I at first thought. And some of those that didn't look too happy are starting to improve. So as I say, we'll have a look round the mounts today and a few other things that I've got in mind. That's once I've woken up properly and am happy about handling my orchids, because I really do not handle orchids first thing in the morning. I'm not awake enough. There's an element of lack of coffee and just not awake properly, and I always find that if I start messing with my orchids at that time of day, I mean sometimes I have to because I'm going out for the day or something, but I'm more clumsy around that time than I am a bit later in the morning. There is a sort of waking up process coming out of the doziness and getting up and running, as I call it. So I'll be back out here soon. Right, so we'll have a look at some of the mounts. As I say, the majority are dendrobiums, but not all. There is a mixture. I've got one bulbophyllum mounted. This is Sycamense, which comes from the Sikkim Hills, which is northeastern India, I believe, but that area, that sort of region, that's where it gets its name from. And so far, all of these lovely new sprouts on this plant have turned out to be new growths, which means the plant is bulking up nicely, but so far still hasn't bloomed. It's just one of those. It's growing well, but isn't blooming. Maybe I've got hopes for those two little growths down in the darker bit there. I don't know. It's a wait and see. I mean, it'll bloom when it's good and ready if it chooses to. The next one along is an Orangus, and this one is growing incredibly well this year. The plantlets out of the side are pushing on and bulking up to the same sort of size as the main plant, so this is growing on well. This is Mr. Sidii. Nice root system. Some new ones in amongst those, some older ones. It's growing well, but as yet has not bloomed. Oh, come on, the other two bloom okay. What's the matter with you? This is my Rodriguezia liana from Rachel. Currently in bloom and stinking the place out with something not that pleasant, quite honestly. I wouldn't say, take it out and put it in the garden type unpleasant, but not what I'd call pleasant anyway. But it has bloomed. It bloomed on a smallish winter growth out the side here. Obviously I'll be looking for new growths on that soon after it's bloomed, or growth, possibly one. But this goes mad with the aerial roots. Some of the roots luckily are in the moss, because this one's getting a bit difficult to hydrate as it is now. Got a feeling it might do better in a pot. I'm thinking about it. This is another Orangus. This is fastuosa. This one blooms regular, and at the moment has a nice new plant growing out of the side, which is potential for more spikes as that little plant gets going. The main plant's pushed up 2 new leaves this year so far, and has produced some roots. But if you compare the root system, that's an Orangus, and that's got sort of, I won't call them flimsy, but wavy edged, relatively thin leaves, whereas these leaves are fat, chunky, leathery things, succulent like. But it has the tiniest of root systems, a really, really fine root system. I mean, some of these roots are new. You can see the growing tips on them, but they're tiny. And this plant survives on the tiniest of root systems. It grows and it blooms well on that root system, so it's happy with it. Now, this next one was out of the big box, and it's Dendrobium tetragonum, and it's a variety giganteum. Now this struggled a bit to get going, but it is getting going now. It's got new growths coming out, and it's growing new roots, some of which are attaching to the mount. So this one's coming on. I don't know how big this plant's actually supposed to be. We will see as the new growths progress. But, there are some good growths on there and some new ones coming, and it's producing a root system now. So coming on nicely. This is Dendrobium moniliform, and it's a variegated variety, which means it's got those lovely cream edges. Those yellow dots are bug marks from when those growths were tiny. Just a few little mealybugs got on there. They take a bite and it leaves a yellow blob on the leaf forevermore. But this one is eventually deciduous after a couple of years, so those leaves they're not going to be there forever, like sort of some of the plants where you get bug damage. This one's having a spurt at the moment. It's pushed up several new growths recently, and it's now producing a much better root system than it's had before. The roots are extending out through the moss, round the mount, round the back of the mount, and up the sides, and hanging out in the air. So this now has a good root system, and as a consequence the latest growths are growing much better, which is it's logical, isn't it? My Dendrobium lodigesi is about to get stripped off. They are kikis technically. I call them plantlets because of how the plant grows, but the way this plant is growing at the moment, they're kikis because they're growing in the air. Well, this plant has a habit of laying itself down on the ground, at which point these would be touching something, and they would be plantlets rather than kikis, because they're the basis of a new plant forming and allowing the plant to move along the ground and establish itself in new places. That way, if the mother plant keels over or gets eaten by something, it survives, so that's the thing. So these kikis are going to come off soon and start some new plants, and I emphasize plants because there's a lot of them. I mean, there's 3 good ones on the end of that cane, a couple coming on here, some down here. On the end of that cane there's 2 good ones coming, and some over here. There's also some good strong canes coming out from the base of the plant. I mean, that's the survival of my plant, is those new canes, because that potentially is where the blooms will be next year. So those need to grow on nicely, but it's doing okay. This is an Australian Dendrobium. The name always gets me. Fleckery, with one eye on the end. And this was the one where this latest growth coming out the front of the plant was actually growing out the back of the plant up into that crevice, and I had to rescue it. So I had to literally unmount it and turn it round the other way to actually allow the new growth to push on. There's a couple of scale on the base of that have been treated, so I just need to check that they're actually dead. Easy way to tell if an adult scale is dead is just gently push it with your fingernail, and if it just falls off, it's dead. Well, that doesn't mean to say the eggs underneath are dead, little tykes. Survival of the fittest, yeah, and those are about the fittest bugs you'll ever get in your orchids, is scale. They seem to survive anything. They won't survive a flamethrower, but then nor will your plant. But this one, the latest growth on this one, apart from the new one that's coming up now, is this one up here. First one to produce 3 leaves, and this is the cane that's most likely to bloom next. This is another one of those dendrobium types that blooms out of the apex and forms a sheath on every single growth, and then it sits there and it teases and it sits there and it sits there, and then after quite a long time it suddenly decides to push a bud up. So one of those annoying ones. I mean, this one's got its sheath already forming, and this one will do the same, but yeah, it's now starting, after being uprooted and moved, which did damage some roots. It is starting some new roots now, so that'll pick up again soon. And this Tolumnia is not where it would normally be kept. It's down here so that I can see the blooms. This is my Tolumnia species, Europhila. Lovely, delicate little yellow blooms, and 2 spikes on the go at the moment. The plant itself, as a Tolumnia goes, is doing very, very well. There's new fans pushing out all over the place, and root system going up the bark, through the moss, down through the bark, and probably round the back of the bark in some cases, yes. So this is a good, strong plant. As Tolumnias go, it looks nice. Some of the older fans, like this very lowest one here, starting to show signs of age, and those leaves will eventually drop, but it's being replaced by many fans. So that's one of my better Tolumnias, that. Right, so that's that little rack done. I'll move on somewhere else. Right, so we'll have a go along this lot now, and this is quite an assortment up here. Right at the end, he says, overstretching on tiptoe, which I shouldn't really be doing, is a Tolumnia. That one's actually got a name. This is Tolumnia Peach. I've had this one quite a while. This should be coming into bloom again soon. This stalled a bit. I was getting a bit worried about it because Anna Maria, this is a long time ago now, at an RHS show in London, she bought 2 Tolumnias at the same time as I did. And she's adamant that hers had Fusarium. Now that is possible, yeah? And the fact that this one slowed up and seemed to be stalling, I thought, yeah, well, if Anna Maria's definitely had, and she should know, maybe mine has too. So I treated mine, and it stayed stalled for a while, and now it's growing. Now it's pushing out quite a few new fans, and they're getting up to size. So it's recovered, and boy, has this one pushed out a root system. So I don't think I'm suffering with the dreaded F on this particular plant. I'm just waiting for this one to come back in bloom, because these are stunning blooms on this one. So that one's doing okay. So I can get that one back up without dropping it on the floor. You'll have to put up the camera waggling around while I'm getting these down, because I can't look at what I'm doing and look at what the camera's doing. Tough. This is one of the big box plants that didn't look too happy. Didn't look too happy at all. And I thought, oh my God, has that suffered with cold damage? But then when I looked up the plant, it shouldn't have done. It should have been able to take the cold, but didn't have a very active root system, although it had an older root system. Well, it's now growing like mad. We've got new growths coming out the top, pushing on nicely, and technically speaking they're kikis because they're not right at the base of the plant, although that one is. Well, the other 2 are 3. I missed that one, hanging downwards. There's another one there too. It's pushing out new growths. So I'm happy that it's recovering nicely, and the roots from those kikis, although they're a bit away from the base of the plant, look where the roots are going. Straight down to the moss and the mount. So that's going to really attach itself nicely now. And it's got no tag on it. I know what it is in my notes, so I will put a pop-up. But yeah, the older part of the plant doesn't look too clever, but again, it will become deciduous as time goes on, so those leaves that are not too good from an older period in its life will eventually drop and be replaced by these new ones up here. So coming on nicely, that one. Let's get that one back up there somewhere where it goes. Now this is a Brassia. This is the one that's been in bloom for a while. And this one is coming off the mount. I might even do it today. It's not hydrating well enough. These are very large pseudobulbs. And if you look now as I hold this plant, it's bending. The rhizome is bending with the sheer weight of the latest two growths. It needs to go in a pot. In fact, I shall put that to one side. That needs doing. As in the not too distant future, that's going to start at least one new growth, maybe two this time round. That would be good, because at the moment it's linear. Yeah, it's just growing in a single line, one bulb after the other, getting bigger each time. That's good. But it currently has a lot of active roots. There are a lot attached to the mount, and some of those will be lost. But nearer the front of the plant, there's active roots, yeah, including this thing. So if I lose a few of the older roots, because I might end up taking a back bulb off to get it in the pot, but I'll see. But that one needs doing, that one needs sorting out. It's been on my list for ages. Right, we've then got the two rescue Tolumnias. This one has been on its last legs for so long. Hello, fluffy cat. This one's been on its last legs for a very long time, and its only sign of life was that, not the tiniest new growth, the tiny new growth behind it, which started to grow and then stopped, and I couldn't see any roots. So I thought, yeah, you're not going to make it. But now it's pushed out another little one, and tucked up the back is a much better one. So it is going to make it, and there are signs. You can see one white new root coming down through the moss. That's all it needs. All it needs is a few roots to push out along with those fans, and it will then start to grow again. And that one is Jarrack Flyer Red Butterfly. Maybe one day, but it's a fair way off blooming. These fans have got to at least get to maturity, but it looks like it's going to make it after all this time. I've been waiting for ages on that one. This next Tolumnia is a miniature. This one doesn't grow very big. Now, this one's in active growth and is producing new roots. So, you know, they've climbed down the mount, along the bottom of the mount, round the side and up the back. So nice little root system on that one, and several new fans. So this one's coming on. Now, that one's got no name. I think that is just an unnamed hybrid. Although I did get some tags muddled up when I messed about with them last year. But the blooms will tell. Any that have bloomed for me, I've got a picture. So if a bloom comes out that I recognise, I'll have the name. But I do have a couple of no ID hybrid Tolumnias. So anyway, coming on. Miniature, but coming on. Ooh, right. Then we get to this one. This one's not playing games. Well, it is playing games, but it's not playing ball, is what I meant to say. Now, this is, well, it's classed as Sophronites cernua, but it's been reclassified as Cattleya, as a lot have. In fact, nearly all of them have. Now, this one had a good blooming last year for the first time, because prior to then it had an odd bloom now and again. But last year it had a good blooming. And since then, not one single new growth on that plant, as yet. But what it has done so far this year, well, through the winter and through this growing season, has dramatically increased its root system. All of these white roots are new in the last 6 months. So if you can imagine what was there before and what's there now, that is now a very good root system, but no new growths, not yet. I find it a bit strange, but you know, it's not dying or anything. It can't be producing roots like that and be a dying plant. The two don't go together. But at the moment, growth-wise, nothing. Strange one. Lovely blooms though when it does. And if it does, it's going to have to wait for some new growth. So it's quite a way off blooming again, this one, I think. Right, then we come along this side. This is effectively the other side of the hanging rack I've just done. I'm not getting all of these done because a lot of these have been filmed frequently, like Hibiki on the end. We've had a good look at that several times. But I will get this one down because this is one of the big box ones that, to all intents and purposes, was dead. It really did not look happy at all. It is in fact two plants. The bulb to the right, the sort of flat one, that was a separate plant that I didn't think was going to grow, and I'm still not sure about it. And then the other plant with the longer canes didn't look happy at all. It's got this strange flatness to the cane, so its cross section is very, very narrow. But at the moment, what this is doing is growing kikis. So as a species in my collection, it's not lost. But the main two element plants do not look like they're growing. So I may be dependent on the kikis on this one, because if it's going to grow new growth, it should have been doing it by now. That's a very old root system. It is capable of hydrating, but I treat this one slightly differently, because when I water this, I water the plant so that the kiki roots get some moisture rather than having to suck the life out of that very, very poor cane. So they get their own separate water. I don't normally do that, but I am for this one. And this is Chrysocrepis, Dendrobium Chrysocrepis. And that is not wrong for the plant. That is a bit like what it looks like, but it could do with some new growth from the base. Nothing as yet. Let's get him back up where he goes. There's a lot of this tiptoe stuff going on with the mounts. Now this one got taken out of a pot because I got fed up with it falling over. This is Dendrobium bullenianum, and since it got turned upside down, it has started to grow some new growths. The older growths are fine. They're still growing. They still haven't reached a terminal leaf. Well, I'd like to think that at least one of them has by now. No, they're all still growing. And while they're still growing, it's highly unlikely I'm going to see any blooms on this. So this could be this may even be, you know, end of winter, early spring before I see anything on this one. But it was a strong plant when I got it. It's grown on well, but it would not stand up in the pot. It just wouldn't have it. So it's gone upside down now. And we've got new growths. That's good. Oh, there's three. There's one round the back too, a little stump. So two round to the right and then another one starting on the left. So three new growths on that to add to the four canes it's already got. So that nearly doubles it in size, doesn't it? Right, the other two along here I'm not getting down. We've seen them often enough. This is Friedrichianum, still in full bloom, and Mr. Hairy. I would like to see if this has dried out yet. Just still wet. I came back from Malvern. I picked this up Monday evening and it was dripping wet. I don't know what it is today, Wednesday, and it still had no water, and it's not getting any till it's totally dry, and then I'll start watering it again because it's gone soggy. But lots of new growths on it anyway. They're pushing out in many places, so it's going to extend its size by quite a bit this year, and the blooms are still hanging on. I'm surprised, but those are lasting really well. Now that's a bonus because they are attractive. All I've got to do is try and get it to do it again now. Right, coming along here, I am aware that as I'm pointing at the racks where these are hanging, they're silhouetted, but in the main they're coming down to look at anyway. This is the Dinema polybulbon that is growing well. I mean, it's producing lots of new roots. It's establishing itself on its mount because it's been recently remounted, and it is pushing on a lot of new growth. So coming on well, hoping to see some more blooms on this. This bloomed well, and I'm hoping to see those blooms again soon. That's that one. And then next to that is Oncidium Tiny Twinkle. So this is a miniature version of a twinkle. And this is just chucking out new growths from every point on the plant has got new growth coming. And each one of those should be at least one flower spike, sometimes two. Just coming down this side, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, just along that one side. And then there's another strong one down the base here. There's another 2 coming up the middle, and another couple round here. So that should be a good show when that reaches flowering size. You can see the size of the older bulbs, yeah? And you can see the size of the growths pushing on. Yeah, that is the strongest growth at the moment. It's not forming its pseudo bulb just yet, so it's got a bit of growing to do yet, but they are pushing on nicely. It will be blooming this year sometime, but it's going to be a bit later. All of those new growths have to mature first. That's that little one. Ugh. And we've got a couple of oddities. Both of these were infested with Fusarium, which was treated, and this one is the weaker of the two. The third one died. But I have noticed recently that the base of the latest 2 growths are splitting. That usually means there's another new growth coming soon. Yeah? Now this one hasn't bloomed. This is Castanet. It's got a good root system now, which is a good sign. And the 2 latest growths are not mature, but maturing. They haven't swollen their pseudobulbs yet. That might be why they're splitting at the base, as they're starting to swell. But it could be new growths. The older leaves are going now. They do, you know. And yeah, I think it's recovered reasonably well. Oh, and then there's another one hanging off the end here, because otherwise it would touch the roof. And this is another Miltonia. This is a hybrid. This is Queen Anne, I believe. Yeah, Queen Anne. And both of the latest growths on here have spikes. They are pushing on now, so the blooms are not too far away. But having never bloomed for me, I don't know how long the spikes are going to get before the buds form. But they are pushing on strong. So this again had Fusarium, so the older plant is infected. It grew 1 new bulb with leaves that did actually swell up quite nicely. So I thought, yeah, I think you've made it, but we'll wait and see. But then it pushed out these 2 new growths. Big strong bulbs, masses of roots, and now it's blooming. So I'm confident that one has recovered. But at my first opportunity, the back end of that plant's coming off, just in case it fires up again. That's what I do. If I know a plant's been infected, I look at the plant as it was when I discovered the infection, and that part of the plant comes off as soon as I can, leaving what hopefully has grown on clean. That's my way of dealing with it. The other way of dealing with it is, of course, a flamethrower. Or just chuck it out and don't take the risk. These are your choices. I know it can be sorted, so I'm willing to give it a go. Now, around the other side here, which is difficult to get at, are 3 of the big box plants. This one is Cattleya. What the hell does that say? Mary Chen, sorry, crossed with Cattleya Duvenii, or something like that. And this is growing nicely, slowly but nicely. But we've got a new growth up the top and another one out to the side there. So 2 new growths on this, and a good root system establishing itself, grabbing hold of the mount. Nice active root system, and that's plenty big enough a root system for a plant that small. So I'm happy that it's developed a root system to support that plant, and then as the new growths push on, so will the roots. So that one's coming on nicely. And the next one from up there is not doing as well, but this is a oh my god. Well, you can see the flipping label. I'm not attempting. The trouble is, one of the main words on there has lost some letters, so I'd have to go to me notes to actually sort that one out. But you know, a Cattleya hybrid anyway. Lovely new growth coming on this one. 2 plants there. The left-hand plant is effectively those 2 leaves on the left and a single pseudo bulb. I'm not sure that's actually got any new roots yet. If there are any, they're muddled up with the roots of the other part of the plant, which has got a nice new growth and has produced some new roots. So that at least half of that is going to make it okay. I do notice on some Cattleya types, when they are a bifoliate, twin-leafed pseudobulbs, they will produce some with a single leaf every now and again. And it looks like this latest new growth might be one of those single-leafed bulbs. It's probably just to do with the strength in the plant, whether it can actually accommodate that second leaf or not. But anyway, it's growing, that's the main thing. And the other one that lives up here is the bigger of the, again, out of the big box. Ooh, don't drop it. Butterfingers, that's trying to work left-handed. Now this one's coming on nicely. It's another bifoliate. And I'm not sure this is going to get much bigger than this. So it's possible it might bloom on the latest two new growths. One on the left there in the shot is a new growth, but that was a winter growth, and now it's pushing out another nice strong one from the base. That was a good guess as to where the new growths were going to come, because if they'd gone out the the bottom of the plant, they'd have been hanging off the mount. But because they've pushed up there, its progression now is going to be off to the left and upwards where there's plenty of room. But that's pushed out a nice lot of roots on that, and with a nice strong new growth there is potential to get that to bloom. But I don't know how far away from a seedling that is. You can see the progression, the tiny little pseudobulbs gradually getting bigger, producing the pairs of leaves, and now producing some new growths. So maybe, maybe not. And that one is the little lemon drops crossed with an Encyclia vetulina. So that's an unusual cross, or it is for me anyway. So that's those up there. Now I'm going to have to get Hercoglossum out of the way, otherwise I'm not going to be able to get at any of those plants, and there are some lurking up in there, tangled in amongst the canes. Hercoglossum's nearly finished blooming now. It's still got a couple of canes with open blooms on. These two have only just opened. But it's on its way out. Yeah, it's on its last legs now, but it's been in bloom a lovely long time. Canes getting tangled up. As far as the plant's concerned, last year's growths that grew on through the winter are the ones near the top of the plant that are arching over, and this year's new growths are at the top of the plant pointing skywards. They will arch over towards the end of the year or in through the winter. Don't see any signs of new roots on this one at the moment, but this one has never had a big root system. It's a massive plant, and all the canes are mainly in growth. There's a few kikis need coming off of there too. But it never produces a mass of roots. It seems to survive on quite a tight little root ball. But it survives, it blooms, and a couple of times that's been a showstopper, the real thing. Right, what I wanted to get up here was the two Tolumnias that are not in their normal place, but this one's down here because it's in bloom. And these are lovely attractive blooms on this one. And this is pink something, pink. It's the trouble, all my plants that went to Malvern came back without their tags. And this one had one of the tags with the picture of the blooms on, so that's lost. But it's pink sunset, I'm pretty sure. It says so in my notes anyway. And the latest growth on this one decided to point downwards, and that's the one that's bloomed. But luckily the spike sort of levelled itself out and didn't point directly downwards. The top of the plant is growing quite a few new growths, and it is got a good root system, and new roots are coming from those new fans near the top of the plant. So that one's growing on nicely. I'm not going to attempt to put that back yet, not one-handed. Then there's another Tolumnia up here as well. This is the one that got burnt a bit. It's still got that purple coloration. I'm not sure it's going to lose it actually. And the green underneath. It's where it was in bloom for so long and it lived there, so it wasn't getting its right amount of light, so it acclimatized to a lower light level while it was in bloom for probably about 4 months. And then I put it up there, so the top of the plant was quite close to the roof, and it singed. Well, it got a purple coloration. It's not burnt as such. But this one's starting to grow some new growths now, along with some new roots. The plant would probably be quite exhausted after blooming for so long on several spikes. But new roots are coming now, and some new growths are pushing on, so that one will get a chance to bloom quite a way down the line, I expect. That needs to recover a bit. Took a lot of its strength out. Right, I'm not going to get all these down, but we can look at them. I'll try and get the camera up high to remove the silhouette effect. This one is come on brain. This is a phyllum, Dendrobium a phyllum, and this was a single kiki from Alberto in Italy. The kiki is growing a kiki. That's a new plant. But because this plant needs to bulk up now, the kiki is going to go up on the mount, yeah, to bulk up the base of the plant. It's pushing out a nice new growth, and it's growing a lot of roots, a hell of a lot. So that's Dendrobium a phyllum. The one next to it is Dendrobium nesta, which this year has decided to push out. No, it's not. That's anosmum. Come on, brain. Dendrobium anosmum. Now this one had a lot of dead shriveled canes on it when I got it that I left on. I will eventually take those off because they're just cluttering. You know, I mean, this is serving no purpose. Look, add it. So they can come off at the base. That'll make room for the stronger canes. This was a cane that grew in the wrong time of year and came to an abrupt end because winter started and I rested it. So it never reached its full length. This one did, and this was the one that bloomed nicely down here. This is the latest cane, and at this time of year, where are we now? June. It's probably less than halfway through its growing season. It's already 12 to 14 inches long. So I've got a feeling that this one will achieve its full length. Right, the next one tucked up in here is a strange one. I rested this when I shouldn't have done. This is glomeratum, Dendrobium glomeratum. It's currently producing a lovely new root system, and it has a single cane. The other cane that goes right down here and curls round has finally stopped growing. That should have been my clue. That was growing through the winter, and I rested it. And it still tried to carry on growing from its reserves, basically, and it managed to achieve it, but it has stopped growing now. If this one's going to bloom, this is the cane it's probably going to bloom on. And it hasn't bloomed for a very, very long time. And then it's got this nice new cane pushing on, and I'm deliberately hanging this one at an angle because I'm trying to tip this cane over. You can see it's getting fatter towards the end. Eventually it will get so heavy that it will become pendulous, and then I can stick it up higher. Oh dear. And then the one right up the back that's just growing nicely at the moment is Dendrobium nesta. That grew 3 new canes last year, all of which bloomed, but they weren't that good a size. Well, this year it's only growing 2 so far, but they are pushing out at a rate of knots. That's also grown a lot of new roots this year, so those are coming on nicely. That's my longer cane dendrobiums. And then round this side, this is going to be fun. Oh, let's do that little Orangus first, because he lives up on his own. Now this is a highlight Orangus, and this has nice patterning on the leaves. It's 2 plants, both of which are growing. Well, that one's got this is its 2nd new leaf recently, and the little plant underneath is on its 2nd one too. You can see the newer leaves are a brighter green, and some of the older ones are going to drop soon. And when we get underneath, we've got a good root system with some new ones, and then we've got some funny looking things coming out of the base of the plant that don't look much like roots, do they? That's because they're not, they're flower spikes. Don't hold your breath. This is an Orangus, one of the slowest developing flower spikes in the world. But the little plant, what is on the left of the shot now, has got 2 definites. And the other plant there looks like it may have 3, but 2 definites and a possible 3rd right tucked in at the base of the plant. Yeah, so that one's going to bloom. As I say, that's my highlight one. And that one's Orangus decariana. And that one bloomed last year, and I think last year was its first blooming for me. But it's going to do it again this year eventually, because as I say, don't hold your breath. They are slow. Right, I'm going to go along this side. This is the last of the mounts now. Right. I'm not getting all the plants down.
This is my Jenkinsii. This was the showstopper this spring, mass blooming for the first time ever. This is growing a lot of new growths. You can see the difference in the colour of the leaves. See, they've got a golden bronzy colour when they first open, so you can sort of pick them out. But there's several. This part of the plant's extending out to the left. It's been doing that over several years now. It's still doing it. There's two nice new growths on the end of that bit. There's one up the top there, and several down here. Quite a few, including some, developing now. So this one's extending itself quite nicely. There's one coming up in the middle there. The older part of the plant in the centre is always going to be like that. So eventually this plant will have to come off of this mount because its central view is not going to look very elegant. The pseudobulbs do drop their leaves, they become very, very shriveled and wrinkled, and eventually they turn that straw colour and effectively disintegrate. Yeah? And I don't want too many of those on the plant. It's going to spoil its look. So I can see 3, maybe 4 distinct plants on here. You've got this bulky bit here. That's a good plant. The bit up the top, the bit out to the right, and this bit down the bottom here. That doesn't mean to say that they would get split up and planted separately. I may split it up and put all the pieces back on the same mount because the mass blooming was quite stunning. If I split it into 4, I'd have to wait quite a while to get that again. But then somebody else could have a piece, perhaps. I'll think about it, but it's not now. It's not a now thing. But it's pushing out a lot of new roots as well down in under there, which is good. Because I suspect when this was originally mounted, the bit in the centre, the only bit I had, that's still got the same moss under it. Well, that moss has long since gone. But most of the actively growing part of the plant now is not in that moss. It's just attached to the mount, so it hasn't got any moss. So I'm not too worried about that bit of moss going over. So yeah, nice plant. Something tells me I need to get some kikis off of here. Those roots are ready. What have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's probably 5, maybe 6 kikis on this thing. They need to come off. But basically, these large canes, the kikis are getting nearly as long as the canes. They really do need to come off. I'll put this to one side. keep forgetting to do it. And this is Dendrobium findleyanum. This bloomed well this year too. This one survives with virtually no moss. It's generating a lot of new roots at the moment, as well as the kikis, and it is producing some nice new canes at the base. Those are the bloomers in 2 years' time, basically. So, yeah, that needs a tidy up. I need to get the kikis off, and yeah, it's growing well, and hopefully we'll get some more blooms again. But the canes near the base of the plant are the ones I'll keep. The kikis I will take off and separate off, into new plants. Quite honestly, if you get a kiki like that, you can plant it as a single plant in a pot and it'll grow on and it'll grow new growths. But wouldn't it look better if like 2 or 3 were planted in the same pot? So you get a larger plant much quicker, which is probably what I'll do. There's probably 2 potfuls there. So coming on nicely, that one. Right, I forgot these 2, but quite honestly I want to give my arm a rest. This is not a lightweight camera, this thing, and holding it up above my shoulder is starting to make my arm ache. This little Tolumnia, this is the Jarak Flyer Black Magic, is coming to the end of its blooms, and annoyingly it really does look like this spike's not going to branch. They often do. I really don't think that one is, but I'm not going to cut it until I'm absolutely sure, because it may still shoot out. But as far as the plant's concerned, this is a small Tolumnia, but it has got one new fan that hasn't bloomed. That's that larger one there, and no sign of, yes there is, there's another new one growing at the base of the one that's got the bloom spike on, so it has got a new fan. And this hasn't got a good root system, but it's got a root system. It's not brilliant, but coming on. And the new fan, this little one, should actually produce quite a few new roots when it gets going. Now this is the, I've completely forgotten. You didn't know I had a plant called I've Completely Forgotten, did you? Well, I have. It's funny, I knew it was nocturnum. I couldn't remember what the genus was. It's an epidendrum. Come on, get a grip. Epidendrum nocturnum. Now, this one has produced an awful lot of new roots recently and is now producing a nice strong new cane. You can see the progression on this. The one at the top to the right was on it when I got it, as was the one next to it. That's the plant I got. It then produced this cane, which did actually bloom. And then if I hang it up, it's now produced this cane, which is about to form a bud. It tends to produce a spike that then sits there for a bit, and then the bud or buds possibly come out the end. And another new growth coming. But that's done an awful lot of new roots lately. One of them even pushed out through the back of the mount. It actually punched a hole in it. But yeah, good root system, growing well, new cane, and will bloom down the line. This is the funny one that has a habit of self-pollinated, which this one did. When this one bloomed, it started to open during the day, and I got up the next morning, came out in great expectations to see what the bloom looked like, and it had self-pollinated and collapsed. So I didn't even get a picture of it, and I didn't get to film it. It came and went in a day, maybe a day and a half, but it went so fast I didn't get a chance to do it. I will not miss my chance this time. I was wondering if I could set up a time lapse on it, but I haven't got the facilities to do that. That would guarantee I didn't miss it in case it opens in the middle of the night. Anyway, to come down the line. I don't know how long. I really don't. That's those two. And the last few, I'm going to have to get these down. Otherwise we can't really see them, which is a nuisance. But they weren't supposed to be coming down today. This is, I've completely forgotten, Dendrobium pramulinum. And the new canes on this are pushing on really well, and those new canes at the base are now producing its new root system, and some of the older root systems branching a bit in places as well. So it will establish another new root system. A lot of these longer cane dendrobiums that are deciduous by nature do that. Their old root system from the existing canes die back a bit. And become not redundant. They do still hydrate, but they're not the fresh new roots. And then each year with the new growths, it produces a new root system to effectively, long term, replace the older one. So it's completely regenerating itself. But 3 good canes growing on this one. So that's, I nearly lost this. It's objected to being rested 2 years ago and nearly didn't make it, but it's growing on nicely now. Nice blooms on that too. And this funny looking thing, if I can get it down, this was doomed. I assumed this was dead. This came out of the big box in a right sorry state, i.e. those leaves and that cane and this stubby little cane here, and I thought it had died, but it has produced 2 new kikis that are growing slowly. They get watered as a separate entity. They will come off because I don't want kikis that far away from the base. The chances are when I do take them off, they're not quite ready yet, I'd like them to be a bit bigger, they will get planted up on the base. But the good news is we have a new growth, so it's not dead. And that's coming directly out of the base. And there are signs just of some new roots starting to grow. So that's been in the not dead yet category for a long time, and now I can safely say it's not dead. It is actually growing. It's a way away from being a good plant, but it's at least growing, at least it's trying. And the last one, this is going to be fun. I'm going to have to put the camera down and I'll come back. Now this monstrosity came out of the big box and is the reason why the box was a big box, apart from the sheer number of orchids in it. What the size of this flipping thing. This is Dendrobium chryseum, and what I thought might be blooms turned out to be kikis all over the place. There's a lot of them, and you know, my normal habit on a plant that's not doing very well is to take the kikis off and put them at the base of the plant. There's no room at the base of the plant. There's definitely no room at the end on this one. This has about 30 new growths on it. it's going mad. And I really do hope that these arch over. I have not had a dendrobium produce canes like this from the base, but it is a substantial plant. You know, I mean, this is a very well established plant. And it's going mad. Literally, there's canes coming out from right down the back, pushing up through the moss even. So growing incredibly well, this one. This will be good if I can get this to bloom. This will be quite a spectacle. Now, in theory, if it's going to bloom on these older pendulous leaved canes, which will eventually drop their leaves at some point down the line. I haven't had it long enough to know when, but probably as we go into autumn, a lot of these leaves will fall. In some cases, that's good, because this had serious spider damage on it. There weren't any on it when I got it. There still aren't any on it, but they've been there. And that's what they do. That silvery tinge, they're tiny, and they bite into the very, very surface of the leaf. And that's cell damage, so it never recovers, even if you kill the little blighters. But they're not there anymore, but they certainly were once. Some parts of the plant were not affected. Yeah, that could be that those canes grew later, but there's definitely signs of where they once were. So that's what you're looking for. But by the time you see that damage, it's too late. They've done it. And to do damage as bad as that on a leaf, there must have been a lot of them at one point. So they were there in numbers at one point in this plant's life, somewhere down the line. But yeah, that is coming on incredibly well. I've never seen that many new growths on a dendrobium before. It's going to double its size. Cheers. But, you know, it's always nice to have a few specimen plants, a few really good sized, strong growing plants. You know, it's all very well having rescued plants and trying to bring them on, but it's nice to have some that are well established and going mad. You know, it's always nice to have some of those in amongst them. So that's my mounts. Now, I know somebody's going to complain and say, but you haven't done your mounted Phalaenopsis. Well, no, I haven't, because I'm going to do a Phalaenopsis update as a separate entity, which will include those mounted orchids. That's why they've been left out. So they weren't left out deliberately. It was planned. That's all I'm going to say. And I will do those at a later date. Now, it's going to be kitchen time, isn't it? I've got a brassica to unmount and pot. I've got a shed load of kikis to sort out. And in addition to that, I've got to get back to something I've been meaning to do for some time, which is sort out some plants for Ronja, who kindly gave me that macae that's growing. Well, it's going mad. There's new growths coming out all over the place and new roots. I would suggest that's going to bloom. According to the lady in question, it tends to bloom in the winter, and it always has done regularly. And somebody else she knows has also got one that also blooms at that time of year. So whether any of the existing bulbs will bloom this year or not, there's signs of bulbs that have bloomed in the past, so, you know, well, it's obviously blooming size, isn't it? But yeah, I need to sort out, because that was not a gift, that was swapsies. And I haven't done the swapsie bit yet, so I need to get on with that. So that may be part of today's kitchen time. Depends how much energy I've got. But what I have made my mind up is that I've got two of the... come on. No, it's gone. I got some... Oh, Eric Young Foundation. I got quite a few Restrepias from the Eric Young Foundation. Two of those are growing on very well, and the blooms are so similar, I've decided I don't need both. So one of those is going to be one of the swapsies to go back. And I've got one that I need to repot, which I will split, and there'll be a plant there. And there's some kikis off of this to go as well. So that will be my replacement plants to go back in the direction. The lady in question is setting up a terrarium sort of effort that obviously will have lovely high humidity and should be able to look after the Restrepias really well in that sort of environment. They don't need huge amounts of light, but they do need high humidity to grow nice, clean, new leaves. and I only just about make it in here. They like 90%, even 95% humidity, one of the highest humidity lovers I know. And obviously in here I'm a bit below that, so some of the new leaves do come out a bit distorted. But yeah, I may include that as part of today's kitchen time, but there will be a kitchen time, and that will probably be tomorrow's video. So hope you've enjoyed looking at the mounts. There is a bit of variety there. It's not all dendrobiums, but there is a lot of them, obviously. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by as we disappear into the mist.